Hey everyone, welcome back to Room 237, and in my last video I wrapped up my reviews of the prequel reboot trilogy of Planet of the Apes. So I want to go back and look at the original series of Planet of the Apes, which I've never really considered myself much of a science fiction fan. I think I've said that before. Outside of maybe mad scientists or zombies or some dystopian science fiction story like that. I like the original Star Wars trilogy for what it is. Its legacy, what it accomplished. Some Star Trek I can watch, but I'm not the biggest sci-fi fan. But Planet of the Apes has always been ranked and considered one of the top 3 crown jewel science fiction properties, along with Star Wars and Star Trek. Started as a 1963 French novel by Pierre Boulle, and then went on to become the 1968 film Planet of the Apes. This is the first version I bought, but then when War was coming out in the theaters, I bought this, Planet of the Apes Legacy Collection, which has all 5 films, so I have 2 copies of the original. And it's got a ton of features. I love this set of Planet of the Apes. And originally, where I had really only been a fan of the reboot trilogy and never been a fan of the Tim Burton film, and coming to respect the original, I actually found I'm a big fan of everything Planet of the Apes. There's only 2 films I don't like. Tim Burton and one of these, which I'll get to. But the original film, Planet of the Apes, I'll have to say is one of my favorite science fiction films. I'm pausing because I'm not quite sure what more can be said about Planet of the Apes. I mean, I'm sure there's a ton of reviews. It celebrated its 50-year anniversary a couple years ago. I know there's a big DVD set that's like the size of a storybook. That would be really cool to have. But it was directed by Franklin J. Schaffner, music by Jerry Goldsmith, starring Charlton Heston and Roddy McDowall and Kim Hunter. Roddy McDowall is sort of like the Andy Serkis of this series. He plays Cornelius in this and the 3rd film, and then goes on to play Caesar in Conquest and Battle, the last 2, which is what the prequel trilogy takes story elements from. The first thing I really noticed about this was, the first draft of the script was written by Rod Serling, writer and creator of Twilight Zone, my favorite TV show. And even though the original script was way different, like it was a very modern society of apes, much like the original novel, with skyscrapers, cars, planes. The budget was too outrageous for that. So a writer that was actually blacklisted from Hollywood for a while, Michael Wilson, came in, and he rewrote a lot of it, and he made the ape city more primitive. The houses kind of remind me more of like Flintstone-y type houses. But what he kept was the Rod Serling ending, and the sort of subtext of racial prejudice and a political allegory, and sort of look at the human condition that Rod Serling was known for in Twilight Zone, but also the huge twist ending. Now, there have been several reviews I've done, some of which was even for Dawn and War for Planet of the Apes, where I said, if you haven't seen this, stop watching and go see it. Because Planet of the Apes is known to have one of the greatest twists in all of film history. And I'm very fortunate to have a version that doesn't have that final image all over it. I've seen DVDs and Blu-rays that have the final image right on the cover, and I think that's blasphemous. When I first saw this, I knew the revelation at the end, but I didn't know the final image. I didn't know how it played out. And but that final image has been talked about, parodied, referenced so many times, it's everywhere. So if you don't know the twist ending at all or anything about it, go see it. Don't watch the rest of this review. It would it's kind of having the same luck of not knowing the twist to Psycho or The Sixth Sense, other things that have been everywhere. But the twist is so well written and so well executed that even though I knew the twist, the way it plays out, it still kind of gave me like an eye-popping, jaw-dropping moment, the way it was played out. Kind of like when I first saw Psycho. I knew the the twist to Psycho, but it was still a wow moment. And I'm sure a lot of people will consider Planet of the Apes to be really cheesy. Yeah, they don't look like real apes. You can tell it's makeup. It was 1968. I mean, this was actually quite revolutionary when it came out as far as latex appliances and makeup goes. This was like never been done before. And I'm sure people now will still look at it and compare it to what's been done today, even compare it to this movie. And because it's the internet, garbage, trash, dumpster fire, it's, it can still be appreciated and respected for what it accomplished back then. I still really like the makeup of this. When I was younger, and before I had seen it, I thought, yeah, that looks really cheesy and corny. But then when I saw it and I realized what these actors had to do and how much they can still emote and articulate, I'm going like this because the mouthpieces, it's still actually quite amazing what they accomplished. But also the music by Jerry Goldsmith, the camera work by Franklin J. Schaffner, and the way it plays out like a Twilight Zone episode. So, I'm not sure how much into the plot I'm going to get, just because it's one of those so talked about movies. But I am a huge fan of this entire series, and I do want to go through all of them. Excuse me. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It is probably the best one. It's the best made out of the original series. I really have a soft spot for Conquest and Battle myself, but I really do love this film as well, and I highly recommend it. I'm also not going to go through all the Easter eggs from this that was referenced in the reboot trilogy, because I already did that when I went over these films. So if you want to see the connections and Easter eggs from this series to this, just go watch my reviews for these. But now I'm going to get into Planet of the Apes. So, spoilers, go see it. Here's the review. So it stars Charlton Heston, Roddy McDowall, Kim Hunter, Maurice Evans, James Whitmore, James Daly, and Linda Harrison. It opens up with Charlton Heston, who plays astronaut Taylor. He's in this spaceship where 6 months have gone by and hundreds of years have gone by on Earth. He's kind of fed up with humans, or just fed up with life on Earth. He likes to explore, but he also wants to see what's greater than man. So he kind of has these little conversations with himself, like, will man ever be this paradoxical being that wants peace but fights with his brother? And then he goes into this sort of, I guess, suspended animation pod where he can sleep and his body will be maintained for like another 6 months. And then it crash lands. The ship crash lands on this seemingly desert planet. It lands in like a lake with canyons and desert all around him. There was 4 astronauts. The female astronaut must have had a crack in the seal of her pod, and she died and rotted. Pretty good effects on that as well. These are all also rated G, except for Conquest, which they all have a fair amount of violence, and Conquest is pretty bloody. So it was back when PG actually meant something. But it lands in the water. The other 2 astronauts, Dodge and Landon, get out with Taylor. They realize that the oxygen is fine, the water's safe to drink. They haven't found any kind of vegetation yet, but they're walking along the desert, and I love the pacing of this movie because it really takes its time with just these 3 men walking along the desert. The music by Jerry Goldsmith is great. It really it does sound kind of otherworldly. It's very experimental. There's a lot of like, I don't really know what they're called. Sort of like those instruments you have in like elementary school where it makes like the sort of shaking sound, that or like the sticks that you kind of rub together. Has a lot of experimental instrumental parts like that. And then they come across some actually pretty creepy imagery where there's like these hills and there's these sort of scarecrow looking things along the edge of it, or they think they're scarecrows. And the first time I saw it, I thought it was kind of eerie looking and creepy. Then they come along a watering hole with a waterfall, which, if anyone has seen the Doors documentary, When You're Strange, the home footage of them swimming around the waterfall, I believe is the same area, because it's all in LA. But I believe I could be wrong, but I want to say it's the same. So the men are skinny dipping, sort of just embracing the water, cleaning, and then their astronaut clothes are taken by what seems to be tribes people. And they get out, they find their clothes are shredded, they put on what they can. They end up in this field of tall grass, and they hear like these horns. I don't know what you would call them, but sort of like signal horns or like advancement horns. I am only calling them that because of what they're called later in later films. And then we see all these people who look like, cave people or tribes people who are mute. And then all of a sudden we see these beings on horses with rifles and nets rounding up these primal humans. And there's like that horn sound. And just as the horse turns around, the camera zooms right in, and we see it's these apes that are riding these horses, wearing clothes and armor, shooting rifles, rounding up humans. And it's that perfect Twilight Zone sort of reveal or moment. The first part of the movie, and then the very, very ending, the twist reveal. There's several episodes of Twilight Zone that are like that, with astronauts landing on a planet, and then with the twist at the end, which I'll get to. But all have different twists. One is specifically I shot an arrow into the air, where you have 3 astronauts. They're walking along the desert. Eventually, there's one left, and then there's a twist that's very similar to this. The other 2 astronauts, Dodge and Landon, are killed. Taylor is shot in the throat, not killing him, but taking away his voice. He's captured. And then he's taken to this ape city where he's imprisoned, taken to like a vet, where we meet Zira, played by Kim Hunter, who's very compassionate towards humans. She's a chimp. Taylor keeps signaling like he's trying to talk, and she notices this. The guards, who are gorillas, they say things like human see, human do. It's this very backwards world that Twilight Zone kind of perfected in many episodes. But also, it's like a regular, everyday person in this extraordinary situation where things are flipped. It's very Twilight Zone. It's the closest thing we have to a feature-length Twilight Zone episode. Or film. Yeah, we did get the Twilight Zone movie, but that's the anthology. I consider this to be sort of like the Twilight Zone movie, which came out 4 years after the show ended. And I think 2 years before Night Gallery, but also has Roddy McDowall, who was in both Night Gallery and Twilight Zone. And they do give him a mute female, which he calls Nova, who she was played by Linda Harrison. He keeps trying to show that he can write. Like when he's out in the big cage outside, he tries writing in the sand. Eventually he grabs Zira, takes her notebook, and writes, "My name is Taylor." And that's when she takes him home to her husband, Cornelius, played by Roddy McDowall, who's an archaeologist who has a theory that humans existed at some point in history as the dominant species. Or at the very least, there's more to our history than we were led to believe. But the whole desert area is known as the Forbidden Zone. Apes have this very strict law and religion given by the lawgiver, this statue. It has laws like ape not kill ape, stuff like that. But also, that apes have been around since the dawn of life. Humans, or we came from humans. By we, I mean apes. So apes came from humans. Pretty much backwards of what we have. And any kind of belief that humans were ever intelligent is considered heresy that's punishable by death. Anytime a human is shown to be intelligent, they'll dissect them and use them for experimentation. And so eventually, it gets to this frustrating point because every time before there's the notebook where he can actually write, there's the frustration of him not being able to explain himself. And he appears just as mute and primal as every other human. And of course, with his notebook, he's trying to explain to Zira Cornelius he's an astronaut from planet Earth. Of course, they don't really believe him. And there even seems to be some sort of racial class even amongst the apes. The chimps are more sympathetic and are more scholars and doctors, or scientists and doctors. Gorillas are law and military, and chimps wear green, gorillas wear purple, orangutans wear orange, and they are the religious and political ones. There's even this great shot, which is also something totally that you would see in Twilight Zone, where Taylor is giving he's given a hearing in court, and we see these three orangutans sitting in a row, and one is covering his ears, other one's covering his eyes, the other one's covering his mouth. A total play on hear, see, speak no evil, which I know the original picture is chimps, but they're all doing that as Taylor's given his hearing when he can finally speak. Just stuff like that I think is very clever, but also humorous at the same time. But it does get to a point where Caesar is found. Because he's ordered to be castrated. And then it's all leading to this point where Taylor escapes. He's running around Ape City. He even sees that his fellow astronauts that have been killed have been stuffed and put in like the ape museum. But eventually he is caught by a net, and that's when he gets his ability to speak again, and he yells, all sort of raspy, like, "Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape." And it's one of the biggest quotes in film history. And I will say that was one of my problems with Rise. It's one of the throwbacks that didn't work. Hearing Tom Felton say it to Caesar is one of my least favorite parts of Rise. Still a great movie, though. Go check out my review for that. But also, so it's then Taylor is ordered to be castrated because he can speak and he's shown to be more intelligent. He's ordered to be castrated. And in this world, humans are captured and either killed outright, used for experiments, stuffed for museums, used as pets or slaves, pretty much whatever. Which, actually, he sees that one of his co-astronauts was stuffed. The other one he sees was lobotomized. So he's rendered a primitive, feral human. So Taylor's ordered to be castrated and lobotomized. And because he also doesn't want to reveal his origins to the council. Because I saw it a few days ago, so I'm just trying to get it all in order as I'm reading this. So Zira's nephew, Lucius, stages this escape for Taylor to get out before he can be, taken care of. And Zira and Cornelius aid him into getting out to the Forbidden Zone. But, and supposedly Cornelius was on some expedition a couple years back and found proof of his pre-ape and human history, but it was ordered to be hushed about it. But they want to go with him so that they can find proof on Cornelius's theory and bring it back to Ape City. So, they go out to the Forbidden Zone. They find this cave, which they are then found by gorillas and Dr. Zaius, the main antagonist. Sort of the big So I guess he's like the biggest political and religious leader of Ape City. He's played by Maurice Evans. But they're able to hold him off because Taylor has a rifle. He gets a hold of Zaius and tells them, hold him off. They go inside the cave and they find what appears to be the ruins of a spaceship and a couple other scattered things, which Dr. Zaius says to either be incidental or things that don't really prove much of anything. But then Taylor finds this doll, this baby doll, and when you squeeze it, it says Mama. So that's when he asked Dr. Zaius, he's like, would apes ever make a human doll that could talk? And then, so that's when we kind of start to realize, oh, in this world, maybe humans did exist. And then apes still took over. So then, Dr. Zaius admits that he's always known about the prehistory with apes and humans, and that humans have always, their answer to everything is destruction, and eventually it got ahead of them and they just destroyed themselves. So then Taylor ties up Zaius, and Zaius tells him, you don't want to know the answers to what you're looking for. But then Taylor and Nova get on a horse, they leave, they ride along the shoreline. Zaius tells Cornelius and Zira that they're going to be tried for heresy, even though he promised them immunity because of the proof they found. He says that's not proof at all. Then they use explosives to seal up the cave. And then when we see Taylor and Nova, they come to a stop. And again, perfect Twilight Zone twist ending. And again, I knew the twist, but I didn't know how it played out. So he's riding along, and we get this view of up above, back to what looks like some sort of structure. Can't really make out what it is. Then this next part of the structure, which looks like a bunch of spikes, looks more familiar. And then when he gets off his horse, camera just sort of pans back, and we get this full view. And he's looking at the half-buried, destroyed, just derelict ruin of the Statue of Liberty, which was done by a matte painting. There's a lot of matte paintings in this series, which I've always been a fan of. I always love the look of matte paintings as backgrounds. And that's when he realizes he's been on Earth the whole time. That's the big twist. He's been on Earth the whole time. Humans destroyed themselves. Apes took over. It was like a nuclear fallout or war. Apes rose from it. So Charlton Heston has to have these reactions where he's realizing I've been here the whole time, but also, my kind destroyed themselves. Where are the reasons why it's like this? And he does it very well, pounding the ground. Damn you all to hell, you blew it up. So I knew they were on Earth the whole time, but I didn't know it was with just the realization of the Statue of Liberty. And that's what they always put on a lot of either the disc or the DVD covers, which I think is really stupid. I wish they didn't always do that. Which, in that Twilight Zone episode, I shot an arrow into the sky. It ends with the final astronaut either... It's been a while since I've seen it. Either he dies just before, or he collapses just before he reaches, a road, or he sees that, there's a road with cars and we see a sign for Las Vegas. Meaning the ship went up, never broke the atmosphere, and came back down. and they were on Earth the whole time. It's known as one of the greatest twists ever, and it really holds on that shot of the Statue of Liberty for quite a while, with just silence, just the sound of the waves crashing, and then it just fades to black. It's like, it really lets you soak it in and think about it. Which is funny because this is known to have one of the worst twists of all time. It is one of, if not my favorite, twists in film history. But like Psycho, even though I already knew it, the way it played out, it was still very effective. And ever since I first saw it, I always thought this series was going to be corny and cheesy, but I found myself being very hypnotized by it. The first part, where it's just the astronauts walking through the sort of desert terrain with just that very evocative and experimental Jerry Goldsmith score, to them being hunted by these things on horses, that when we get that great zoom and horn sound, we see it's apes, great Twilight Zone twist, and then the sci-fi adventure of Taylor trying to explain that he's human and can speak, he's from another planet, to having to do this escape to the Forbidden Zone, and finding out he's been on Earth the whole time. And then, of course, there's all the political and religious subtext, and all like the subtext of racial prejudice. And this came out in 1968 at the absolute, the height of civil rights. I think that was the year Martin Luther King was assassinated. The anxiety and everything in the Vietnam War was, it was a crazy time for this to come out. And it was a huge hit. It was a huge hit for 20th Century Fox. And kids loved it because of the adventure quality of it, the fantasy sci-fi adventure. Critics and audiences loved it because of the subtext of prejudice, religion, politics, and everything. It's one of those movies, I know a lot of people will see the G rating get turned on. Oh, it's a kiddie movie, but it's still a pretty powerful and effective movie. I really enjoy it. I think it's greatly paced. It's entertaining throughout. It goes from very hypnotic to very exciting to very just thought-provoking and thinking. I do like Charlton Heston as Taylor. I love Roddy McDowall as Cornelius. He definitely is the Andy Serkis of the series. I like him as Caesar as well in the last two films. Fortunately, he's not in the next film. Kim Hunter is great as Zira. Maurice Evans is a great kind of villain, like the intellectual, coming from a place of politics and religion, sort of like their primitive jungle version of like a police, what's the word? I don't want to say dictatorship, but a very closed-minded view and belief of the past, and how it's sort of, I guess, kind of like the Bible, like as far as any question of origins is considered heresy, or any thought is considered heresy. And it's still very relevant today. I think this is a great movie. And John Chambers did the makeup. I know they had James Brolin and who was it? It wasn't Kim Hunter. Oh, Linda Harrison, the one that played Nova. They did the very early makeup tests for the Apes, and the one playing Dr. Zaius was Edward G. Robinson. Edward G. Robinson's Zaius makeup was a bit more elaborate. Brolin and Harrison's makeup was a bit more simple, but it was enough to show that you can have a movie with talking apes and have it not look silly. But 20th Century Fox was desperate for a hit. Which the producer behind it, I think his name was Zanuck, or the head of 20th Century Fox. He was the one that made it happen. And Arthur P. Jacobs, the producer, he had hits before, and it was him and a guy, I think named Richard Zanuck. I could be wrong about that. They're the ones that really made this happen. This was a huge risk for this to come out. I mean, a movie about talking apes. Because right around this time, there was Dr. Dolittle, and that didn't do very well. Or at least the musical version of Dr. Dolittle, and it didn't do very well. But when this came out, it made a bunch of money. It was very well received, mass marketed like crazy in every way imaginable, and immediately spawned a franchise. Now, even though I'm a huge fan of the franchise, it does have the perfect ending. It just has twist, end. No epilogue, no explanation, it just ends. Holds with that silence with the waves, and then just ends. Perfect ending. And yeah, I'm not a fan of the second film, but I love this one and the three after it. I know this might not be as in-depth as my reviews for the reboot trilogy or even the ones to come after this, but it's one of those movies that, you know, there's already been so much said about it that, you know, what more can I say? I love it for all the same reasons other people do. This has a great documentary on it called Behind the Planet of the Apes, hosted by Roddy McDowell, which goes through the whole series and how each film was made. Great documentary. But that's 1968's Planet of the Apes. I could probably say it's, well, I am a bit more, I probably am a bigger fan of these. Just because I did see these ones first before I saw any of these. But the first one is a classic. It is an excellent film. And sort of like Star Wars, no matter what trilogy or part of the series you're a fan of, wouldn't have any of it without A New Hope. So it's sort of like, it's always going to rank high with me for that reason. But it's also just a really good, well-made movie. And one of my favorite things about it is the pacing. I love slow, hypnotic films like that. This was the first one I ever saw, which I saw when it first came out, but yeah, I'll get to this one. Not a fan of that at all. But the first Planet of the Apes, I really do enjoy it. If you didn't care about spoilers and you stuck through the review and haven't seen it, even though it's now spoiled, I still highly recommend it because it is a great example of really smart, well-written story writing. And don't be deterred by the timely acting. I've heard some people say that recently, the timely acting and script. Like, no one says stinking and damn dirty ape. Anything like that, even if this is deemed corny and cheesy, it just makes it more unique to the film. Which I don't find this corny and cheesy. I love the look of the apes. But I'm just going to start repeating myself. So, 1968's original Planet of the Apes. Very good movie. I didn't see it till I was in my 20s, but I really enjoy it. So, thank you for watching.